Fenrir, the wolf who devoured the gods. In the beginning, before the first crack of thunder, before the first whisper of the wind across Yggdrasil's branches, there was a prophecy. It spoke of a beast born of chaos, a creature so vast, so ferocious, that not even the gods could tame him. His name would shake the foundations of Asgard. His breath would turn the oceans black. His howl would echo beyond the ends of the 9 realms. He was no ordinary wolf. He was Fenrir, the doom of the gods, a son of trickery and terror, a harbinger of the world's end. From the moment his eyes first opened, fate had already chained him to a destiny so dark, so inevitable, that even Odin, All-Father of the Aesir, could not avert it. Tonight, we dive deep into the story of Fenrir. From his cursed birth to his savage vengeance and the final cataclysm he would unleash upon gods and men alike. Before we begin this legendary journey, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video if you love epic mythology. Join our giveaway raffle to win a brand new Samsung S25 and Amazon gift cards. The link is pinned in the comments below. Don't miss your chance to wield a little power of your own. Now prepare yourself. This is not a tale of heroes. This is not a tale of salvation. This is the story of an unstoppable force, the wolf who would tear the sky apart. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Birth of Fenrir, Wolf of Destiny. Long before the fires of Ragnarok ever smoldered on the horizon, there was a union that defied the laws of the cosmos itself. Loki, the god of mischief born of the Jotnar yet adopted by the Aesir, took as his mate the giantess Angerboda. In the shadowed forests of Jotunheim, she bore him 3 monstrous offspring. Their very existence sent shivers through the branches of the world tree. The first was Hel, a child of death, half living, half decayed, destined to rule the underworld. The second was Jormungandr, a serpent so vast it could encircle Midgard itself. And the third was Fenrir. At his birth, the earth trembled. His tiny body, already larger than a full-grown wolf, pulsed with a terrifying vitality. His teeth, barely emerged from his gums, could already rend steel. His eyes glowed a deep, baleful gold, reflecting a future drenched in blood. The gods of Asgard, wise and wary, soon learned of the 3 siblings. They knew that these children would bring ruin upon the world, yet the Norns, those who weave the threads of fate, had already whispered the unchangeable truth. The doom had been set. Odin, seeking to outmaneuver destiny, took swift action. Hel was cast into the depths of Niflheim, charged with ruling over the dead. Jormungandr was hurled into the endless oceans, where he grew and grew, waiting for the day of reckoning. But Fenrir they dared not destroy outright. Perhaps it was pity, perhaps it was fear, or perhaps it was the pride of the gods, believing they could control even the wildest forces of nature. They brought the young wolf to Asgard. There, among the gleaming halls and golden spires, Fenrir was raised. But he was never loved. He was watched, measured, tested. Every meal fed to him was accompanied by 100 wary eyes. Every paw step he took echoed with the silent prayers of terrified gods. And Fenrir grew. He grew faster than any had predicted. From a cub the size of a man to a beast the size of a longship. His muscles thickened like coiled ropes. His jaws could shatter the hardest shields. His shadow blotted out the light where he walked. Only one among the gods dared approach him freely. Tyr, the god of war and law. Tyr would feed Fenrir, would speak to him, would even play with him as a pup might play with a sword, knowing well the danger but refusing to flinch. Between Tyr and Fenrir, a fragile bond formed, a bond of trust in a world filled with suspicion. Yet even this bond could not stop the march of fate. As Fenrir grew, so too did the gods' unease. Their dreams were haunted by visions of a great wolf tearing down the walls of Asgard, of Odin falling beneath gory jaws, of the 9 realms wreathed in flame. The All-Father, burdened with foresight, knew the time had come. Fenrir could not be allowed to roam free, yet he could not be slain, for killing him might only hasten the coming doom. No, Fenrir would have to be bound, imprisoned, chained before his power reached its terrible peak. The question was, how does one bind a force of nature itself? Odin dispatched emissaries to every corner of the 9 realms, seeking a solution. Dwarves, masters of craft and mystery, were summoned. Deep in the heart of Svartalfheim, they began to forge a chain unlike any that had ever existed. A chain not made of ordinary iron, but woven from impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the breath of a fish, and other vanished wonders. This chain would be called Gleipnir, soft and smooth as a ribbon, but stronger than the foundations of the earth, and with it they would attempt to cheat destiny itself. But Fenrir was no fool. The gods would not approach him openly with chains and manacles. They would instead use guile, masking their fear with games and deceit, and even then, the wolf's golden eyes would burn with suspicion. The first test had failed. The second would not. Fenrir, born of giants, cradled by wolves, raised among gods, now stood on the edge of history, and the gods, trembling despite their pride, prepared to betray the only creature who had dared to trust them. Chapter 2. Chains of Fear, the binding of Fenrir. The gods, once radiant with confidence, now moved like shadows, their voices hushed, their plans cloaked in dread. They approached, Fenrir with false smiles and a game upon their lips. A test, they called it, a simple challenge for the mighty wolf. Could he, in all his strength and majesty, break free from bonds crafted by the gods themselves? At first they used ordinary chains, thick iron, blackened and cold, from the forges of Asgard. Laughing, Fenrir agreed. He allowed them to wrap him in the first set of chains, their links heavy and strong. With a single flex of his shoulders, a single ripple of his titanic muscles, the chains shattered like brittle twigs. The gods smiled nervously, their laughter thin. A second chain was brought forth, twice as thick, runes etched deep into its links. Again, Fenrir allowed himself to be bound, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Again, he broke free with ease, sending shards of divine iron raining down like shooting stars. The gods clapped and cheered, masking their rising terror, but they knew that soon Fenrir would grow too great even for the mightiest chains, and so they revealed Gleipnir. It was a strange thing, not a chain of iron but a soft silken ribbon. It shimmered with unnatural hues, shifting between gold, silver and deep violet. It was thinner than a thread, lighter than a feather. Fenrir eyed it with deep suspicion. He knew tricks when he saw them. He had lived among the gods long enough to scent the stench of deceit. He demanded a price for their so-called test. If he was to allow himself to be bound with this strange ribbon, one of the gods must place a hand within his jaws as a pledge of good faith, a symbol of trust, and none but Tyr had the courage to step forward. Tyr, the god of war. Tyr, the god of sacrifice. With grim eyes, Tyr placed his right hand between the jaws of the wolf he had once fed, once called companion. Fenrir watched him, listened to the oath spoken, and then the gods wrapped Gleipnir around him. At first it seemed harmless, weightless, as soft as dew on morning grass. But as Fenrir struggled, the ribbon tightened. With every movement it constricted, becoming harder, stronger, pulling tighter than the roots of Yggdrasil itself. Fenrir realized the betrayal too late. He howled, a sound so fierce that the stars shivered. He snapped his jaws shut in rage. Tyr's hand was torn away. The blood of the gods soaked the sacred fields of Asgard. Tyr did not scream. He stood, stoic, his face pale, his arm a bleeding ruin. Fenrir thrashed, roared, bit, clawed, but Gleipnir held. The gods, victorious yet terrified, took a great chain and fastened it to a massive boulder. They drove the stone deep into the heart of the earth, binding Fenrir to the ground. To silence his endless howling, they thrust a sword into his mouth, propping it open. The blade pierced his jaws, and rivers of saliva flowed from his mouth, forming the river Van, a river of grief. Bound, gagged, humiliated, Fenrir lay imprisoned. But his eyes, oh, his eyes, they still burned. They burned with a rage that would one day set the sky on fire. They burned with a hatred that no prison, no chain, no sword could extinguish, and in the silent spaces between the worlds, the Norns wove their tapestry, the threads of fate twisting ever closer to the end. Ragnarok awaited. Fenrir awaited. His time would come, and when it did, no god would be safe from his wrath. The betrayal would be repaid 1,000-fold. This was no mere wolf, this was vengeance incarnate. Chapter 3. Shadows over Asgard. The growing terror as Fenrir lay bound beneath the earth. The gods tried to resume their endless feasts, their golden games, their songs of triumph echoing through the halls of Asgard. But joy never fully returned. Shadow hung over them, a shadow in the shape of a chained wolf with golden eyes, buried deep but never forgotten. Odin, the All-Father, sat high upon his throne in Valaskjalf, gazing far across the 9 realms with his single eye. Yet even he, who had traded much for wisdom, could not see a path that avoided Fenrir's wrath. The more he peered into the threads of fate, the more clearly he saw it. The wolf's chains breaking like rotten vines, his monstrous form rising. Above the plains of Vigrid, jaws wide enough to swallow the sun, and not just Fenrir. Other forces stirred in the distant dark. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, coiled ever tighter around Midgard's seas. Hel grew her empire in the misty realms. Of the dead, the fire giants of Muspelheim sharpened their swords and waited for the call of battle. The end, Ragnarok, crept closer with every heartbeat. The gods, desperate to hold back fate, armed themselves. Odin commissioned the greatest of armors and weapons. Thor, his hammer Mjolnir crackling with the rage of thunderstorms, trained day and night, preparing for a battle that no strength alone could win. Frey forged alliances and tightened the bonds of Vanir and Aesir. Yet beneath their shining armor, doubt gnawed at them. They remembered the blood on the ground when Tyr lost his hand. They remembered the way Fenrir's roars shook the very bones of Asgard. And worst of all, they remembered that Fenrir had once trusted them. Their betrayal was not just an act of necessity. It was a wound, and wounds fester. Deep below, chained. In the darkness, Fenrir did not sleep. He felt every slight, every whispered insult, every fearful glance that had once been cast his way. He dreamed of freedom, but not the freedom of peace, the freedom of retribution. The sword, jammed in his mouth, kept his jaws apart, but it could not silence his mind. Time passed strangely for Fenrir. Years, decades, centuries blurred into one long burning moment of rage. His muscles strained against Gleipnir's impossible strength. His breath, thick with hate, turned the earth above him brittle and cracked. Mortals began to whisper tales of strange rumblings in the earth, of rivers that flowed backward, of howling winds that carried the scent of blood. The skalds sang quieter, songs. The warriors sharpened their swords a little more often. The farmers looked over their shoulders when the night grew too dark. They felt it. They all did. The chained storm beneath their feet. Meanwhile, Loki, the father of Fenrir, plotted his own revenge. Humiliated by the gods, bound in his own torturous prison beneath serpent's venom, Loki bided his time, nursing the same hatred as his son. A hatred that would one day set the sky ablaze and turn the seas to poison. A hatred that would tear down the walls of Asgard stone by stone. Fenrir's vengeance would not be a lonely one. It would be the spark that ignited a firestorm across the cosmos. And even as the gods danced and feasted and pretended not to see the shadows growing longer each day, the clock of fate ticked onward. Tick, tick, tick. Each moment bringing Fenrir closer to the hour when his chains would shatter, his voice would thunder once more across the 9 realms, and the stars themselves would flee from the horror of his wrath. The gods had bound him with trickery. They had silenced him with pain, but in doing so, they had not destroyed him. They had created something far worse. They had created a storm waiting for the right moment to break, and when it did, not even the gods could escape its fury. Chapter 4. Ragnarok. Unleashed, the wolf's rampage. The end began not with a roar, but with a whisper, a shudder beneath the roots of the world. A ripple across the oceans that startled even Jörmungandr in his slumber. A flicker across the sky as if the stars themselves trembled in fear. The first to feel it were the Norns, the weavers of fate. Their looms shivered, threads snapping one by one. They spoke no words, for there was nothing left to say. Ragnarok had begun. Deep beneath the earth, where Gleipnir clutched Fenrir in its silken vice, the impossible finally happened. A crack, a fracture, the ribbon that had been spun from the breath of a fish, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain. It frayed. Fenrir, sensing the weakness, surged with all the fury he had stored for countless ages. Muscles like mountains strained. Teeth sharper than spears gnashed against the sword wedged in his jaws. The earth quaked, mountains toppled, forests split open like kindling, and with a final deafening snap, Fenrir broke free. The sword clattered from his mouth, blood and black saliva pouring forth as he raised his massive head to the heavens and howled. It was a howl that shattered the gates of hell. A howl that froze the blood in the veins of gods and men alike. The sky, once blue and bright, blackened with storm clouds. Lightning tore the heavens asunder. The sun, sensing its doom, fled across the sky, but Fenrir was faster. With a leap that shook the 9 realms, the wolf caught the sun in his monstrous jaws and devoured it whole. Daylight vanished. Darkness reigned. From the ashes of the broken world, other horrors rose. Jormungandr, the world serpent, lifted his massive coils from the seas, poison dribbling from his fangs to flood the oceans. The ships of the dead Naglfar, crafted from the nails of the damned, loosed their moorings and set sail across the cursed waters, carrying armies of the dead to war. And at the helm, with fire in his eyes, stood Loki, Fenrir's father, finally free. The armies of Muspelheim, led by Surtur the fire giant, marched forth, their swords blazing so brightly that the heavens themselves began to burn. And in the heart of the maelstrom, leading the vanguard, was Fenrir. He charged across the broken fields of Vigrid, each step leaving craters in the earth, each roar causing avalanches in distant mountains. The gods, in all their glory, assembled for the final battle. Odin atop his steed Sleipnir, his spear Gungnir in hand, Thor with his hammer, Frey with his shining sword, Tyr even maimed, ready to face death with honor. But Fenrir did not fear them. He had waited too long, suffered too much. This was not just battle, this was justice. Odin rode forward to meet him, his armor blazing, his war cries echoing like thunder. But Fenrir was a force beyond mortal reckoning. With a leap that blotted out the sky, he descended upon the Allfather. Odin thrust his spear forward, its tip sharper than fate itself. Fenrir caught it between his teeth and shattered it like glass. Then with a snap of his jaws that had once been silenced by trickery and fear, he swallowed Odin whole. The gods screamed in horror. The earth wept, the sky turned red, but Fenrir's vengeance was not yet complete. He would tear down the very fabric of the world, rip apart every lie the gods had built atop his suffering. Thor rushed forward, hammer raised high. Frey unleashed his blade, shining with the light of 1,000 summers. Tyr, bleeding but unbroken, charged with a roar. But it was too late. The walls of Asgard crumbled, the rainbow bridge bifrost, splintered and fell into the void. The seas boiled, the forests burned. Fenrir stood amid the ruin, a titan of fury, his mouth dripping with the blood of gods and the ashes of worlds. He had waited eons for this moment, and he would not be denied. Yet even in his greatest hour, fate, cruel, unrelenting fate, had its own designs. Another would rise to challenge him, another born not of the old betrayals, but of new vengeance. But for now, Fenrir reigned supreme, the last and greatest wolf, the shadow that had swallowed the sun. The nightmare made flesh, the end made real. Chapter 5. The Slayer and the Slain. Fenrir's final battle amid the smoldering ruins of the world, one figure stepped forward. Young, fierce, and shining like a blade newly forged, he was not one of the old gods who had betrayed Fenrir. He was Vidar, the silent god, son of Odin, born for this moment alone. Vidar had lived in quiet places, far from the roaring feasts of Asgard. He had built his strength in solitude, deep in the forests, among the roots of ancient trees. He was the god of vengeance, of silent oaths and unbreakable wills. And his silence was about to thunder louder than any battle cry. In his hand, he carried no glorious spear, no hammer of legend. Instead, Vidar bore a single weapon, his mighty boot, crafted from the discarded leather of all the shoes ever made, by mortal hands, thick, indestructible, ancient beyond reckoning. Across the battlefield, Fenrir turned his bloodied snout toward this new challenger. Golden eyes, mad with rage and triumph, locked onto the silent figure standing alone among the fallen. The wolf sneered, saliva dripping from his jaws. He had devoured Odin himself. He had torn apart gods and men alike. What threat could this quiet one possibly pose? Vidar said nothing. He merely advanced, step after step, toward the beast that had swallowed the sun. Fenrir roared, a sound that split the heavens. He charged, earth flying from his paws, jaws yawning wide enough to engulf the world once more. But Vidar was ready. With a speed born not of rage but of unshakable purpose, he dodged Fenrir's snapping jaws and planted one foot, the indestructible boot, upon the wolf's lower jaw. The ground trembled beneath the force of it. Fenrir snarled and writhed, trying to shake free, but Vidar pressed down with all the strength of the earth itself. With both hands, Vidar seized Fenrir's upper jaw and, with a cry that shattered the silence of centuries, he pulled. The wolf thrashed, the wolf howled, but Vidar's strength was the strength of stone and tree and iron and oath. It was the strength of all the broken promises made to Fenrir, now turned against him. With a sound like the rending of mountains, Vidar tore Fenrir's jaws apart. The wolf's final roar gurgled into silence. Blood, dark as night, poured across the battlefield. The monstrous body shuddered, spasmed, and finally collapsed. The great Fenrir, who had once terrified gods, devoured the sun and shattered the world, lay dead at the feet of the silent god. For a long moment nothing moved. Even the armies of fire and death paused, staring in awe at the fallen titan. Vidar stood above the body, his face as still and silent as ever. There were no cheers, no songs, no triumph, only silence. Because though Fenrir had fallen, the cost was too great to bear. The sun was gone, the gods were slain or broken, the seas boiled, the earth itself bled. Ragnarok was not a victory, it was the inevitable end. And yet, in the quiet after the storm, something stirred, not a rebirth, not yet, but the faintest breath of a new beginning. Vidar turned his gaze to the ruined heavens. He knew that the world would never be the same. But from ashes, even blackest ashes, new life could one day grow. For now, though, the silent god stood vigil over the fallen wolf, honoring both the enemy and the fate that had bound them together. Two forces both betrayed, both inevitable, both necessary, the slayer and the slain. Two sides of the same broken coin. And somewhere, far beyond the ruins of the 9 realms, beyond the cold stars and shattered worlds, the threads of a new destiny began to weave themselves, not for gods, not for monsters, but for something else, something still unnamed, something still unborn. Chapter 6, From the Ashes, A New World Rises. The battlefield of Vigrid was silent. Smoke coiled into the blackened sky. The seas still fumed with poison. The mountains lay shattered like broken teeth. The once mighty halls of Asgard were nothing but ruins, their golden spires fallen and tarnished. And yet, in the stillness, in the silence, something stirred, not the trampling of armies, not the roar of beasts, not the clash of swords, but a breath, a whisper, a heartbeat. From the wreckage, life began to push its way upward, as fragile as a blade of grass, as stubborn as a flame refusing to die in the wind. The old gods were gone. The wolf who had swallowed the sun was slain. The serpent that encircled the world had released its poisoned bite. But the world itself, battered, bleeding, broken, still lived. Out of the ruins, a few survivors emerged. Balder, the shining god of beauty and light, returned from the realm of hell, freed at last from the chains of death. Herder, once his slayer, now stood by his side, sorrowful and reborn. Together, they brought with them a new wisdom, tempered by suffering, forged in darkness. Vidar, the silent avenger who slew Fenrir, still stood, a sentinel among the ashes. Vali, god of vengeance and survival, weathered the storm as well. 2 sons of Thor, Modi and Magni, found the mighty hammer Mjolnir lying in the ruins, a symbol that even in death, strength endured. And from the forests and hills, from hidden places untouched by fire and fury, mortals emerged, the seeds of a new humanity. Leif and Lifthrasir, the first among the new, had hidden deep within Yggdrasil's sheltering roots, surviving the fires that consumed the world. Now they stepped into the dawn of a new age. Above them, the sky began to change. A second sun rose. a daughter of the first, radiant and new, banishing the long night. The rivers cleared, washing away the poison. The forests, blackened and burned, sprouted green once more. The animals crept back, cautious but alive. The world tree, Yggdrasil, though wounded and scarred, still stood tall, a living monument to resilience. The old order was gone. The old betrayals, the ancient hatreds, they were ashes on the wind. In their place, a fragile hope, a chance not given freely, but earned through suffering beyond comprehension. The gods who survived vowed that they would not repeat the sins of the past. No more chains for those who were feared. No more lies spun into golden promises, no more cycles of betrayal. Instead, they would build a world not upon power and pride, but upon balance, between gods and men, between fate and freedom, between vengeance and mercy. And in the memory of the fallen, Odin, Thor, Loki, Tyr, and yes, even Fenrir, the survivors, would forge a new future, one not ruled by fear, but by hope. And so, as the new sun climbed higher into the heavens, painting the broken earth in gold and crimson, the world took its first trembling steps into a new beginning. Not without sorrow, not without scars, but alive. The wolf had fallen, the serpent had uncoiled, the fire had burned itself out, and from the ashes life, stubborn, defiant, beautiful, rose again. The end was not the end, it was only the beginning. The wolf has fallen, the gods are gone, and yet from the darkness, a new world rises. Thank you for journeying with us through the legend of Fenrir, the wolf who shook the heavens. If you enjoyed this deep dive into myth and destiny, make sure to like, comment, and share your thoughts with us. Subscribe for more epic myths brought to life. And don't forget to join our raffle for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. The link is in the description. Don't miss out. Until next time, keep seeking, keep dreaming, and remember, legends never die.